Okay, we're up to a nice round number of 40 participants. We've got a few more people coming in, but I think we'll get going as we've got a packed agenda. So welcome to everyone, the third session of CoMoUK's 2023 conference on shared mobility. We're heading now into a bit of a deep dive, looking specifically at mobility hubs and how we can bring together different mobility solutions most effectively, reflecting on what we've learned over what was, I think, we'll see by the end of this session, a busy 12 months in this fast-moving field. My name's Mark Frost, and I'll be chairing the afternoon's debate. My background is in local government and specifically in London government. However, for the last 3 years, I've been running my own consultancy, supporting largely public sector clients with transport planning, environmental strategy issues. I'm also the immediate past chair of the Transport Planning Society, having handed over to Ben Plowden actually just at our last AGM. We've been working very collaboratively with CoMoUK, in particular in the area of integration of land use and transport planning, and how we can make sure the planning process is doing as much as it can do to drive sustainability and decarbonisation. And looking forward to working with CoMo furthermore in 2024. So in terms of format for today, we've got a roster of 5 very exciting and different presentations from a number of different speakers who have tussled with mobility hubs in 2023, and perhaps more importantly, are game enough to reveal and share their experiences in this space, warts and all. We're going to try and keep it quite snappy and quite fast-paced. So each presenter is looking to talk for about 6 or 7 minutes about their case study. We'll have a little bit of time for some immediate questions to that speaker from the floor. And if I can encourage you to use the chat function for any questions that you have of the speakers, or indeed any of your own reflections from your own activities, your own craft in this space, and please do use that. However, at the end, we'll also hopefully have about 20 minutes for a panel debate. So we'll have all the speakers back on the virtual panel, and we'll be having a discussion, hopefully guided by questions from you on the floor, as to really tease out the details of how we can progress mobility hubs, the delivery of mobility hubs even quicker and even faster in 2024. If you're so inspired during the session, please do share your thoughts on your social media platform of choice using the hashtag CoMo2023. I'm certainly keen to get as many people sharing that as possible. Okay, so without further ado, I think we will kick off with the first presenters of today. So we've got Acacia Hasler from the London Borough of Camden and Georgie Wells, Principal Consultant at Aecom, talking about their experience in North London. Guys, over to you.
Thanks very much, Mark. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Acacia Hasler. I'm a Principal Transport Planner at the London Borough of Camden. And this year we've been working on developing some mobility hubs with Aecom. So over to you, Georgie.
Hi, everyone. I'm Georgie. I'm a Principal Consultant at Aecom.
Great. So we're going to be delving into the lessons that we've learned this year from developing a network of mobility hubs in the Somerstown area of Camden. So for those of you who aren't that familiar with Camden, it's a central London borough, and it has a population of around 270,000 people, and it runs from Holborn in the south all the way up to Highgate, so quite sort of urban in the southern bit and more residential in the north. And in 2019, Camden published a transport strategy that's very focused on promoting more sustainable travel within the borough and enabling more infrastructure to be developed that allows for this. As part of this, we're also looking at improving the shared mobility facilities within the borough, and there's a real need within Camden for mobility hubs. We have a phenomenal amount of shared mobility demand, and we have one of the highest number of e-scooter trips made within any London borough. So looking more at the local context, in 2021 we started developing a project in the Somerstown area that was focused on making this part of the borough more climate resilient. It's a very deprived part of the borough, And one of the projects that we came up with was establishing a network of green mobility hubs. And as a result, we commissioned Aecom to work with us to take this piece of work forward. So that's what we're presenting to you today. So in terms of the objectives of the Somerstown green mobility hubs, they're focused on increasing the number of shared mobility services in the area, making it a more climate resilient place, enabling more residents and visitors to choose active and sustainable modes of travel. There's already a very low car ownership level in this area, so it contributes to making journeys by bike and walking even easier, and contributes to helping reduce vehicle dominance even further. And we really wanted to create consolidated sustainable modes that were sustainable hubs that were strategically placed throughout Somerstown, and also gave us an opportunity to pilot introducing green mobility hubs with a hope of introducing these elsewhere in Camden, as we haven't done this before. And it goes without saying that there was a real focus on improving air quality through introducing these hubs. So in terms of the principles that we developed for the design work, because this was a new area for us, and we really want to roll this out throughout the borough, we've commissioned CoMoUK as an experienced advisor that would input into the designs that we developed and help assist us with the process. We wanted to combine shared mobility services in a single location. We already have a number of shared mobility services across the borough, but they tend to be individual facilities on their own. We wanted there to be a real focus on improved greening and public realm. So a real focus of these hubs is on introducing greening measures as well as shared mobility. Each hub needs to have an identifiable logo and plinth that identifies it as part of a wider network. And there's a real opportunity as well for looking at generating revenue from the hubs that could then be used to support the ongoing maintenance of these. So we've been looking into opportunities for generating advertising from the hub. We wanted to also look at how the hubs could support a package of improvements for the local residents that would enable them to shift from car ownership to shared mobility. And this is something that we're continuing to investigate, and also having a 12-month monitoring plan that we would use to assess the success of the hubs 12 months after they've been implemented. So over to you, Georgie.
Okay, so just to give you a brief overview of the scheme in a bit more detail. As Acacia said, it's a pilot scheme, so really focused on testing and trialling different options and learning from this, from these 7 sites before Camden make decisions about how and whether to roll that out more widely. So we did quite a significant amount of early engagement with the community around the locations and the different features within the hub, and that was really helpful for us and really taught us a lot about the kinds of things we should be implementing. We're down to 7 sites from a long list of 11, and all the sites are categorised as primarily residential, commuter or destination, so really just influenced by our own knowledge of the place, also by what people have told us, and by the kind of trips we know are happening in those different locations. So we want a mix of those different categories to ensure that we're testing what works on those different kinds of streets and different locations, so we're learning all the time about, you know, what might work across Camden more widely. And then just to say, we're quite a small team, so to allow us to progress with 7 sites simultaneously, we phased the scheme into 3 kind of feasibility stages, and then obviously that leads on to 3 different consultation stages and 3 different implementation stages. So we've just completed consultation on stage 1. Stage 2 consultation will start around Christmas time, and then stage 3 later in the new year, around February. Next slide, please.
Sorry, I'm having trouble getting it to mute.
It's really keen for you to stay on the consultation phase there, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Reloading
There's
it.
a lot to say. Nice one, well done. Okay, so this is just giving you a snapshot of Goldington Crescent, nearly.
I thought I'd seen all the technical glitches that Zoom could throw up, but this is a completely new one.
Maybe I won't expand the screen. That seems to be part of the problem.
Yeah,
Can you see that?
If you use the Zoom, yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is just giving you a snapshot of Goldington Crescent, which is one of the sites in the first phase. So you can see on the right is a visualization that we used in the consultation to show how the street might look with the changes implemented. I won't go through all the details. I think it gets shared afterwards, but just the boxes around the edge give you some ideas about the kinds of things we're looking at implementing in this residential style hub. So cycle hangers, we've got at least 2 cycle hangers in each of the residential locations for secure on-street bike storage for residents. Also expanding our micro-mobility bay provision in this area, and then cycle M stands for visitors. And a cargo bike in the distance you can't really see. We found that car clubs have been really well received in terms of residents, and obviously that is a good mechanism for encouraging people to give up their private vehicles, whereas some of the other options might be less likely to achieve that. So we have taken the decision to include car clubs where we can, and just make them EV, obviously, where possible. Next slide, please. Okay, so just a really quick snapshot of some of the engagement materials and consultation materials that Camden has produced to help people understand more about this scheme. So you can see a flyer and posters that have gone up in the local areas. We've taken a kind of micro consultation approach to this because we have 7 sites in quite a small, all within one ward. We are trying to consult people only once on the site closest to them, to where they live in the ward, and then obviously our wider stakeholders and other contacts will get the consultation information for all 3 sites. So I think just as a kind of headline bit of information on the consultation that we had back on phase 1 recently, we had between 64 and 72% positive and in support of those first 3 sites in phase 1. Okay, next slide. So our final slide is just a few lessons learned. There were lots, we had to really cut it down, but some of the ones we thought were interesting were engaging early with internal and external stakeholders. It's quite a new concept. It does take some explaining. And it did also really inform the kinds of measures we put forward at each of the sites, and we have definitely changed our original views about whether some different features were important. So water fountains, for example, much more important to the local residents than we expected, and although they're challenging, we are really working to include those where we can. Establish a maintenance plan early on. We have found, back to water fountains again, that some of the features that we're looking to include are not included in the standard maintenance contract. So it's worth thinking about that a bit earlier, that things won't necessarily be standard. Not all hubs need to be the same. Again, this has kind of evolved. I think the hubs and the different sites have individualized as time has gone on, and as we have learned about what the residents want to see, and engaged more ourselves with what is suitable for each of the different sites. And you don't need much space. Some of our sites are 5 to 7 parking spaces, so really quite small, although it is a big impact, especially on a small residential street. The changes we're proposing are quite significant. So the use of the high quality visualizations really does help to kind of show people the changes that we're proposing. We found them to be really useful. And then just a final one, including other walking and cycling improvements where you can. So improving a crossing or adding contraflow cycling, dropping curbs, enhancing desire lines. Those are all things that we've managed to include in our designs so far for these 7 sites that are just other benefits that Camden can deliver alongside the hubs. And that's it from us. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you both. Well done, persevering with the technical issues there. There was a couple of questions in the chat. One was, which you kind of, I think, answered, was around whether these are typically on carriageway or on footway. And there appears to be a picture there of an on footway bay, but you make reference to parking spaces there. Generally, would the attempt be to put it on carriageway?
Yes, they are all on carriageway. So they're all taking out parking spaces. Yeah.
Excellent. And another question, do they link or are they close to bus routes?
Where possible. So Somers Town doesn't actually have bus routes going through it, but it does have bus routes running around the outside. So we're planning to wayfind to the nearest bus stops, and also other facilities. Euston Station and King's Cross are pretty close to some of the hubs. So we'll wayfind rather than siting them exactly around the bus stops. Okay,
and I guess that goes with the different types, residential, commuter, and destination as well. We'll also guide the location. Okay, there's a couple of questions that we might be able to bring in terms of, for example, e-scooters, but there's one specific question around car clubs and the extent to which car clubs are incentivized to join these hubs, or whether it's just part of the normal Camden approach to providing car club permits. Do we know the answer to that? Is it a general part of the car club network, or are these special permits in some way?
They'd be part of the existing car club network, as far as I understand. So we're working with our car club provider to input into the design where car clubs are being introduced.
Okay, so you're almost co-creating these spaces with those providers. Okay, brilliant. Okay, thank you very much. Sorry, there's loads more questions actually, but you'll just have to wait for the panel discussion because we're running a little bit behind time. So without further ado, if I could hand straight over to Robin Tyne, the project manager at CoMoUK, and Chris Finlay, project officer at HITRANS, talk about their experience in somewhere perhaps slightly different to Camden.
All right, can you see my screen all right?
We can. If you can give the presentation a go, that would be good. Yeah, perfect.
Okay. Brilliant. Well, hi everyone, I'm Robin Tyne, and I'll hand over to Chris to kick off the presentation.
Hi there, my name's Chris Finlay. I'm the project officer for mobility hubs for HITRANS, which is the Highlands and Islands Transport Partnership for the region of the Highlands and Islands. Next slide. So yeah, we'll be talking about the eHubs project, which I was project officer for. So the eHubs project was funded by Interreg Northwest Europe, and it was a subsidiary project called eHubs. It ran from 2019 to 2023. HITRANS joined in 2020, although I only came onto the project in the end of 2022. It had a 12.5 million budget across all partners, and there were 21 partners. The deliverables included mobility hubs as a whole, connecting bus routes, train stations, bus stations, etc., to deliver e-bikes, e-cargo bikes, EV car clubs within those places too, and also urban areas as well, to create mobility hubs. The project is complete now, and the management of the existing eHubs is continuing. And also we're trying to assimilate the eHubs project into other projects. We have an active travel budget, which is kind of being used on the maintenance and ongoing management of the eHubs. Next slide. So I'm keeping this quite quick. So one of the major challenges of actually getting the eHubs in was lead times and cost for new electrical supplies for our e-bike share scheme. Some of the SSE connections that were quoted were up to 17,000 in some instances. They could be as little as 5,000, but it just depended on where the node was that they needed to connect into and how much excavation was needed. Our HiBike manufacturer, which HiBike, sorry, is the e-bike share scheme, actually went bankrupt, and instead of the scheme closing, we took on operations and maintenance of the scheme, We were the only one to stay open in the UK, but luckily, because we had funding from our active travel budget, we could continue keeping it open. And we're actually looking to expand the high bikes as well, which is a major bonus. So the high bike e-cargo bike delivery never materialized due to the bankruptcy. We were supposed to get cargo bikes from the manufacturer, but they never came to fruition. So we found an alternative in place and put that in place, which was a sort of generic lock that you can open and rent a bike via an app. So we managed to get them sorted and put them on the street. The enterprise EV lead time took quite a long time for the car clubs. We had budgeted for 8, and just due to the sort of delay in getting them on the ground, we only managed to install 2 out of the 8. But it was actually quite easy to get them installed. I saw there was a question about parking spaces. So we worked quite closely with the Highland Council, and were able to sort of get them to agree to parking spaces in public places quite easily. So lessons learned about this. So use of community engagement is crucial. We found it a lot cheaper and easier to actually get electrical supply from a community centre or a school or a community complex, where we could just tap into their supply rather than getting a new supply in from SSE. Some businesses and organisations have got EV chargers that are for staff and the public. Some of them are barely used. There's not a whole lot of electric cars up in here in Inverness, so we were able to get agreements with them to put EV charger our car clubs in the parking spaces for their EV chargers, and often they're quite happy to facilitate between moving the car if someone needs to use the charger. Obviously, no operator is risk-free from bankruptcy. So depending on who you go with for any sort of car clubs or bike shares, there's always a risk of bankruptcy. You don't know the financials of them. It's better to negotiate monthly or quarterly bills rather than pay upfront costs, which we were stung by, and making sure that the contract is beneficial for both parties, and obviously the operator isn't holding all the cards. Branding is an important one. We created our own eHubs brand, incorporating the HITRANS logo, and we've put that across all the eHubs modes of transport, so it's universally recognised, and we can actually roll it out throughout the whole of the Highlands and not just Inverness. And also to try and have as few apps or sign-ups as possible. Quite a lot of people get a bit tired with having to download different apps for different modes of transport, and we've managed to actually keep this quite low and integrated it into one app. And that's for me. So on to Robin.
Brilliant. Thanks, Chris. And then that takes us nicely on to our pop-up mobility hubs project, which we're doing. One of the partners, key partners, is HITRANS with that. So basically, this concept comes from a few things. It comes from the idea of parklets and parklet mobility hubs. So the image on the left is from Redbridge in London, where we accredited a parklet mobility hub designed by Meristem Design a couple of years ago. The image on the right is a pop-up hop-in point, as mobility hubs are called, in the Flanders region of Belgium, which was run by CoMoUK's sort of counterpart organisation in Belgium, Mobipunt. And we wanted to sort of combine the sort of placemaking element of the image on the left with the practical utility of the image on the right. And that's what led to our pop-up mobility hub project. So pleased to say that as of a few weeks ago, we have 2 pop-up mobility hubs in place in Scotland. It's funded through Paths for All, their Active Nation Fund, which aims to get more people in Scotland walking, wheeling and cycling for short local journeys. This hub here is our collaboration with HITRANS. So it's located in the car park of a primary school in Merkinch, which is a urban residential area near the centre of Inverness. And it's got a virtual docking station for the high bike scheme that Chris mentioned. It also has bike repair stand and pump for any member of the public to use. It's got planting, which we worked with the school to plant up, and it's also got space for walkers and wheelers to rest as well. And we've also got an information totem, and as Chris mentioned about developing a recognizable brand identity, we really wanted to use that. So the image on the right shows the information totem using HITRANS' eHubs branding. And in terms of sort of lessons learned, well, it's an ongoing project. We're going to do a couple more pop-ups, we hope, in and around Inverness between now and March. And we're also running a similar pop-up, as I mentioned, in the Forth Valley. So the image on the right is from our pop-up on High Street in Denny, which is a town near Falkirk. In terms of, I think Chris sort of alluded to this, but, the importance of good partner organisations like HITRANS or our other partner in the Forth Valley, FEL Scotland, really can't be understated. Paperwork always takes longer than you might think, whether that's insurance, permits, all of that sort of stuff. I think another interesting point, and maybe relates to some of the comments earlier about is it near a bus service? One of the real strengths of the Inverness pop-up mobility hub is that there's really good sustainable transport provision already in place that we can basically connect with the mobility hub. So that's like the high bikes, like nearby buses. We're hoping to potentially work with the car clubs provider in the region, Enterprise, if we can, for a future edition of the pop-up. So that it's a bit more challenging in the Forth Valley hub, where those services aren't as well provisioned. We are holding open days, so do keep a lookout on our social media and emails for if you'd like to come and visit our pop-ups in the new year. Otherwise, that's all from us.
Excellent. Thank you both. Yeah, I mean, bankruptcy, there's lots of challenges, but bankruptcies is a particularly difficult one to navigate. So well done for picking that up. There's actually a question on that in the chat from Mark Strong about how the bike share scheme is now working now that bankruptcy has happened. You say you've picked it up. Have you essentially just stepped in and
yes,
made it as operator?
Yeah, so HITRANS basically took on all operations of the high bike scheme. Before the company went bankrupt, they handed over all details of accounts, and we've basically taken over everything. Myself and a colleague were lumbered with the operations of it, but we had to go to the IT provider, software provider, SIM card provider. We're working closely with the software provider who are managing to get spare parts to us, and we also had to employ our own mechanic to service the bikes as well to make them safe for public use. So we've basically we only closed for a week while we changed over to the SIM cards to our accounts, but other than that, it stayed open from we got everything transferred over to us in June, whereas Stirling, Edinburgh, and I think there was another scheme down in Guildford, they all closed down. The biggest benefit to us is we had funding to be able to cover these things, whereas the other sort of the other partnerships didn't have funding.
Yeah, so yeah, essentially you're publicly subsidising the
yes.
schemes or investing in services.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. We're running a little bit behind. There are another couple of questions I'd like to ask you, but let's bring you back for the panel if that's okay, guys. We're going to swiftly move on to Hannah Wilson, who's the Director of Partnerships and Engagement at the Shared Use Mobility Centre. She's going to talk us through her experiences over the last 12 months.
Awesome, thank you. Let me just share my screen.
We can see that, but I don't think it's actually in presentation mode, but it's kind of
I think it should be. I think can
it's
you see
fine.
it?
Yeah, we can see it. Yeah.
Okay. Is it full screen though?
We can see some tabs around it and your tabs on the bottom.
Okay.
But
okay. I did it in presenter mode. Hopefully that's okay. But good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for your time. As Mark mentioned, I'm Hannah. I'm our Director of Partnerships and Engagement at the Shared Use Mobility Center. If you're not familiar, we're a nonprofit working to replace car-centric transportation with people-focused mobility to fight climate change, promote equity, and strengthen community. And today I'll be talking about a new project that we started recently on designing mobility hubs for women and caregivers. It's just getting started, so I'll share kind of our plans for it, and then maybe be back next year to share some concrete lessons learned, but I've also pulled in a couple of lessons learned from the US that we can talk a little bit about as well. So to get started, just wanted to take a moment to zoom out a bit and start just to talk about the larger problem statement that we're trying to solve of mobility insecurity. So if you're not familiar, at a high level, transportation security is, the ability for people to move to the places that they need to go, work, healthcare appointments, grocery stores, etc. The University of Michigan has done some work in transportation and security. They've developed, if you're not familiar, a transportation security index that validated 16-question survey that focused on kind of the symptoms of transportation insecurity. So in the US, 1 in 4 adults are transportation insecure. And my kind of way of thinking about it is, if their primary mode of transportation was not available, can they get around? And you'll also see some disparities here amongst racial disparities and also urban versus rural. And then layering this on top of gender travels, which we'll get a little bit more into, women actually make more trips than men. They make shorter non-work trips. And yet we design most of our transportation systems for men with kind of the hub and spoke model into the downtown and, thinking about the trip chaining that happens with women more often. And additionally, women and caregivers face additional financial and time burdens. This is pulled from the New York NYU study called the Pink Tax that surveyed and found kind of reasons such as harassment, theft, perception of safety, causing women and caregivers to use alternative modes of transportation, specifically at night, and this resulting in a larger financial burden. So one way to solve these issues and what we're here to talk about today, the infrastructure of choices, and I won't go into detail here, by shared mobility, we mean, anything that frees us from our dependence on using the private car. So the systems, services, infrastructure, digital information systems. And of course, mobility hubs are the physical ecosystem that can connect and house these transportation options. And so 2 mobility hub networks that I thought I'd pull out for you guys in the US at least. One in San Diego that's put together by the San Diego Association of Governments, started in 2021, is about 30 mobility hubs. And then another in Minnesota, run by the Minnesota Shared Mobility Collaborative, started in 2019, and they also have about 30 mobility hubs. So some just high-level lessons learned here for you. Utilizing that networked approach, we're doing a lot of that thinking at SumC, that regional collaboration and buy-in with dedicated personnel. That can be so simple, but just kind of dedicated by title to that project. The proximity to transit and also integration with other transportation goals, complete corridors, EV charging hubs. We've talked a little bit about sustainable funding models and also this approach to focusing on historically disinvested communities. So getting into the Mobility Hubs for Women and Caregivers project. So, when we're thinking about this, and the hypothesis here is, what does a mobility hub network look like for women and caregivers? What would support for their travel patterns look like? And our overall hypothesis here is that developing a mobility hub network centered on women and caregivers will also increase accessibility for women and caregivers, but also for other more vulnerable users using the transportation system. So this project is funded by Vinnova in Sweden, and we're also partnering with Living Cities. We are just getting started, as mentioned, so I'll share a little bit about some of the research questions that we're looking at here, and then kind of our plan for moving forward. But so some of the research questions we're looking at, we're kind of breaking them down by user needs and design, policy and sustainability, comparative economic analysis, and equity and impact. We are still kind of narrowing in on the exact research questions and then going into that concept framework and wanting to define what does a caregiver mean, who are we talking about, what are some of their specific transportation needs and preferences. And so from here, we'll go into kind of consultations, looking both in Sweden and also in the US, likely Chicago and in LA, doing some ethnographic research and some conversations. And really, we're looking to develop a design framework. So a little different than the other presentations here today. This will be a little bit more high level. It'll think about things that are needed, like short opportunities to connect shorter distances, slower streets, people carrying bags, wheelchairs, the social infrastructure that's needed to make people feel safe, good lighting, so on and so forth. And really what we're hoping to find is that this design framework could be, a vital tool in achieving a just transition from carbon intense to zero carbon transportation systems, while also serving the needs of a gender-based equity issue. So more to come on that. This is just sort of a little bit of a visualization. This is Chicago, where I'm based, and kind of you're seeing that traditional hub and spoke model. This is kind of a circle line that you might consider adding to connect some of the dots around the area, and then here some kind of thinking about mobility hubs and where we might place those. We are actually also doing work in Chicago, doing a mobility hub networked approach as well, but again, just getting started. So excited to share some of the lessons learned maybe next year again. But thank you so much. Sorry if I went quickly, wanted to keep us on track.
Brilliant. Thank you, Hannah. That's fabulous. So the idea of having a sort of woman-centered approach to this is that about location, or is it about the product that is available within these sort of shop fronts, or is it a mixture? Is it the way it's branded, or is it all of these things?
I think we want to kind of cover all of those things, since it's not going to be located in a specific space and grounded somewhere specifically. We want to make it as robust as possible to think about the pieces that people need to add. So, if a city is looking to implement this that doesn't have a bus system that connects those shorter distances, that we maybe be something that we recommend. I think the branding and the signage is definitely a big piece of it as well, to make sure that it's kind of marketed and branded towards women and caregivers and their needs.
Excellent. And you didn't mention it, but I kind of heard the echoes of invisible women there during your discussion, and about the fact that so much of the transport planning network is planned for radial routes into and out of the city centre, and all these trips that happen in the suburbs are very poorly catered for, and feels like you're into an interesting line of inquiry there with mobility hubs as a solution to that.
Yeah,
brilliant.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Well, I hope it's not actually still early in the morning there, is it, or late at night?
Just turned 8 o'clock, so not
okay.
So
All right, please stay around for our panel, because we'll bring back, and we're good to explore issues of equity in that. Moving swiftly on then from Chicago to the equally glamorous environs of Nottingham, Iain Turner, Transport Planner at Nottingham City Council. Please provide your experience.
Okay, so I'll just go on to presentation mode. Right, I'll set the stopwatch.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that. A quick overview. We're funding the 8 e-mobility hubs out of the FT Future Transport Zone funding. We've got 16 million across Derby and Nottingham city regions areas, and it's one of 3 major works schemes in that one, along with developing a data platform and mobility as a service, a MAS app. So what we did initially was we researched case studies of design precedents and hubs across Europe and North America, and then tried to root it into what would that mean, what those principles look like in Nottingham. So what we did was we looked at what transport modes we've got in Nottingham. We've got 2 bus services, a really good public transport network, tram service. We've already got an active car club. We've got e-bikes and e-scooters, train station, and then looked at possible sites where we could actually locate hubs. So it was based on where all these things interlink, but also where we actually had the possibility of putting something down. Nottingham has a lot of tight streets. It's quite difficult to actually find a room in a lot of areas. So we did a mapping exercise and came up with 10 potential sites. We also did a concept brief to kind of nail down what we wanted, and that's where this saying comes from in terms of, you know, if we could say it in one sentence, what would an e-mobility hub be like in Nottingham? So once we did that, we engaged.
Iain, sorry,
Yeah.
I don't think your slides are progressing at the moment. We're still, as far as I can see,
Right.
we're still on your first slide.
Can you see that side? Were you on that side?
Yeah, so yeah, that's the FTZ funded program. Yeah.
And was it this? You didn't see this slide?
No, that's the one. Yeah, there we go.
Okay,
There's
well, I'll just down here. Yeah. So this is just shows you all the transport providers we've got, and then the mapping exercise we did where we had 10 shortlisted locations from a list of about 50. And then we developed a concept brief just to nail down what we wanted. It's a document, a 16-page document, which goes over some of the design principles and some of the modes and some of the things that we wanted harnessed in a mobility hub. From there, we contracted a designer to look at some concepts, what a hub could look like, and had some concept designs on that. These are what they look like initially, where they were quite bespoke. They integrated the kind of public realm part of the hub with the transport provision and enhancing the public realm. But there are also difficulties in terms of maintenance and bespoke and revenue funding that would be required to maintain them. So we kind of had an iterative approach where we gradually just the designs evolved. And what we've done is we've got 3 residential locations and 3 district car park locations, and we're using different principles for both. So the residential ones, we're really starting from scratch. And these were located really where we had either the possibility of putting EV charging in there, or we already had some of the modes already in those locations. So I'll just quickly go through some images of both types of sites. So we've got the 3 residential hubs. This is one of the sites where it was just on a long grass verge where we had always intended to put EV charging in there. And then so far right picture, you can see there's EV charging, but there's also a car club there. And then in the middle, there's the public realm kind of uplift. And then we've got the micromobility parking for e-bikes and e-scooters here. This site actually isn't on a bus route. It's about 30 meters just around the corner. So there would be some journey planning, route finding work needed there. And then the other 2 residential hubs, we've got one, if you look at the top right-hand corner, that's just a concrete island at the moment with the loneliest man in the world there. And what we've looked at is really uplifting that area where it's opposite a school. We've got the school involved in terms of the design and what they would like to see there. And we've got the bus stop and the micromobility parking down here. And then we've got the EV charging here, and then the bus stop remains there. And then this one is in front of a library with the e-bike parking here. There's a bus stop opposite, and there's a bus stop down the road. There's EV charging here with the potential for the car club on the other side of the road. And the district car parking hubs, we've really tried a different approach where we've tried to do it ourselves once we've learned some of the principles. So we have just got some seating that we've got from a normal supplier, as well as the micromobility corrals, and we've put them there, and we've added EV charging bays in the car park. And then with the next one, we've got also this bottom middle picture shows the car park as it would be. These the bottom row of car parking bays are actual EV charging bays already, with a car club added, and then it's just adding the corrals, adding some seating there to improve the public realm. And then finally, just on lessons, yeah, I think it's been said before, but earlier stakeholder engagement and over a longer time period, so it can both feed into the design and also takes into account any lingering issues. We think maybe that sometimes you do work in isolation, and bringing internal colleagues in as a project team would help in terms of the maintenance issues that you might come across, the road safety stuff. And then branding's a really important part of that. But as we've got the mobility as a service work going at the same time, it's really key to work in parallel with that and make sure the branding works for both the hubs and the MAS work. So yeah, that's it.
Well, it's quite a lot actually, and I think brilliant. Thank you for that as a whistle-stop tour through what was obviously a huge amount of work. There's a couple of questions. I think they're more panel debates. In terms of that stakeholder engagement, what was there what particular things that turned up during that process that threw you off course that you perhaps weren't expecting?
Well, I think a lot of it was positive in a way, in terms of they're really excited about it. I think from our experience with e-scooters and e-bikes, and you're saying that there's going to be some parking there, but overall, I think they just wanted to be more involved in terms of the design. And actually, one of the key things was that 2 of the sites have got they have their Christmas trees there, so you need to include make sure they can still have their Christmas trees there. So all from minor things to really big things to no-goes. I think we developed a couple of other sites which actually, as we found out more about the process, they weren't really goers. So it was just about saving time, cutting things off at the pass rather than letting them go a bit longer.
Yeah, no one wants to be the person who takes away the community Christmas tree. That's definitely definitely a bad place to be. And in terms of the branding, how engaged were you with that? I mean, did you kind of focus group it, or was it a sort of selection of designs that was decided in house? Like, did you involve the community in that process at all?
A bit of both. I think it's really it's still a work in progress. So we haven't made a full decision on what brand it is. I think what we wanted to do initially was we got a design team to look at it, and then we did some engagement in-house, and then once we've narrowed it down to the design that we like, then we'll do the some external work. And we're working, and with that we were also working with Derby on it. So there's we need to kind of work across councils as well.
Yeah, okay, that's always a challenge. Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much, Iain. As I say, please come back for our panel debate in about 10 minutes' time as we introduce the last of our speakers, Matt Griffiths-Rimmer from the Communications and Impact at the Hadley Property Group. Matt, please share your experience.
Hello there. Can you hear me all right?
We can, yeah.
Good stuff. Okay, cool. Yeah, thanks very much for having me. Some amazing stuff going on. So my name is Matt Griffiths-Rimmer. Is that in full screen? Let me just stick that into.
Yeah, we can see the kind of tab at the top if you can.
There must be a way that we can, yeah, let me just put it into full screen.
You're using one of those weird Apple things, so I can't really help you, I'm afraid.
And is that better?
Yeah, we can certainly make it out. I think we can still see the top bit, but yeah, it's fine.
Okay, all right, cool. So my name is Matt Griffiths-Rimmer. I'm from Hadley Property Group. We're a mixed-use developer based across London, primarily inside M25, with around 4,000 homes and 250,000 square feet of commercial and civic, educational, community spaces within our developments. So just before we kind of get into it, we pride ourselves on what we consider to be quite an inclusive and holistic approach to regen work. And I'm here just to run through our recent work in shared and future mobility. I was asked to speak about the lessons that we've learned in 2023 about sustainable transport and the provision of sustainable transport hubs in mixed-use development. But in honesty, our first 2 pop-up hubs will soft launch in January and the tech follows it in February. So I thought that maybe the best thing to do would be a little dive into what comprises our hubs and the direction that we see it taking. So Go Stratford is the name given to the first 2 hubs. It's spread across a couple of our development sites, both of which are obviously in East London, hence the name. It's a partnership between ourselves as landowner and developer with Brompton Bike Hire, Enterprise Electric Vehicles and Mobilio, who are providing the mobility as a service technology, which supports the hub's operations. The Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park is also a partner. The Olympic Park is home to a number of innovations around transport. And so it should be said they're a very progressive and perhaps appropriately resourced local authority, something which, when you're trying to do something like this, we can't really underestimate the importance of. So what is Go Stratford?
Matt, just to say, we're still on slide 2 at the moment. The Zoom gods are not looking on us favourably today. Have you moved on from slide? We've still got introducing Hadley at the moment in front of us.
Oh, right. Yeah, no, I have moved on from that. Let's just see if we can do it again. Any better?
Okay, we've got Go Stratford with the partnerships that you just talked through.
Okay, great. Now then,
And
has that clicked through?
Yes, perfect. Yes, thank you.
Oh, thank God for that. Do you know what? I think I did this last year with you guys, and exactly the same thing happened. So maybe just the Mac and PC gods on. They don't talk anymore, do they?
No, sad.
So what is Go Stratford? So it's a community-driven mobility hub which operates purely to try and drive behavioural change and raise awareness of the need to shift away from private car ownership as far as possible towards shared and sustainable methods of transport. So it includes e-cargo bikes, Bromptons, electric vehicles, and Bluetooth locks for people that are visiting the areas. The 2 hubs are in question are on opposite sides of the Olympic Park, on the aforementioned Stratford sites. Although they're quite close in proximity, each brings with it its own sets of needs and challenges. One is on the Olympic Park itself. For those who know the area, it's on the park side of Westfield, and it's really close to the London Stadium with 56 acres of parkland that surrounds it. That's the first of our hubs, which we designed at the tail end of last year, maybe just going into sort of January or February of this year. We've set these hubs up to be as flexible as possible as we look to spread them out across some of our development sites and to work with our sort of different partners. So this one is a site called IQL North on the park. We're just securing planning for the use at the moment. It has Bromptons through the dock that you can see on the front, just on the street side there. It's got, interestingly, it's got Brompton's first foray into e-cargo bikes, which is the much bigger box down here. It's still operated from the same dock, the Mobility as a Service app, which then just unlocks it, a bit like the DeLoreans out of Back to the Future. The enterprise e-vehicles that also make up part of this offering is just across here on the north side of the site. You can see it across in the middle. That's just to accommodate the fact that there's a drop curb existing there. So these are pop-up hubs. There are completed hubs within the development plans themselves, but we work off such long timelines that we try and get things moving as early as we can, especially when it's kind of behavioural change or slight sort of nudge theory pieces of work like this. This site is directly adjacent to the Greenway, which is a major pedestrian route in Newham. And also you can see Stratford High Street, which is one of the sort of main arterial routes across East London. So this has now evolved a little bit from the one that you've just seen. This is the whole hub that's about to go into Stratford High Street, where we've sought to build on the flexibility with a bit more of a kit of parts approach to the infrastructure. So Go Stratford now incorporates the potential for parklets, for seating areas, where you can get a coffee, have some water, or just basic bike repairs, etc. You can see some of the planters also down by the high street as well. It's some of the approaches that I've seen in some of the other presentations. We just tried to make it as flexible and easy to drop in as possible, certainly while we're doing this kind of like 1 year, 2 year temporary use ahead of planning. The whole thing is powered by Mobilio, who are producing Mobility as a Service app on our behalf, which has the functionality of a mass transit app like Citymapper, but with the ability to add in-app purchases. So this then gives us the opportunity to not just take money, which as I mentioned, is not really the point of what we're trying to do, but rather to use the app to give away thousands of hours of usage for Bromptons, for e-cargo bikes and electric vehicles. So each of those providers has brought with them their own kind of set of social value commitments and pledges, and we've just sort of worked it up together to see what we can do in terms of an offering. Our charity partners at each of the sites are absolutely crucial in order to getting the word out and just to make sure that these spaces are activated in these early days. As you can see on the Stratford High Street, we've got the workings of a very small container village, which has side-by-side bike taxis operated by Bikeworks, who are a charity based on the Olympic Park, doing some amazing work around accessibility, inclusivity, and also helping to alleviate loneliness in local people as well, people that are able to get out there and move freely. And then also with Cycle Sisters, who are a charity which empowers Muslim women with programmed and accompanied rides. Newham's an amazingly diverse borough, and we just wanted to ensure that our sustainable transport options go out as far and wide as possible within that. In terms of lessons learned, it would be great if we can perhaps just come back to you in about 6 months' time and talk to you about how things are going. At the moment, the hubs are not staffed, but there are caretakers with responsibilities, and we see local and associated food and drinks offerings as key to sort of helping move things along and activate those spaces. It's far from an exact science, and also it's not really our day job. So we've very much been kind of learning on the job as we've been just trying to design these hubs, but hoping that with some energy and goodwill and the support from our partners, we can kind of get it out there and get things moving, really. So I do think that the flexibility and creativity of approach is going to be key to making it work. Like the e-cargo bikes, for instance, they might provide a delivery network on one of the sites, and on the other site, it might be a much more family-led offer. So we're probably going to flip those bike offerings around a little bit and just, it's going to be suck it and see for a while. But yeah, hopefully we can get some more information and some decent findings for you by the time we get to the summer. And that's it from me.
Brilliant. Thank you, Matt. Yeah, lots of exciting stuff there. You made the point that they were a very well-resourced local authority as a development corporation set up by the mayor. These are funded via as part of planning agreements, or are they funded separately by the park?
They're actually there's a grant that's been made available by LLDC, but most of it comes from ourselves, to be honest. So we've kind of, because we've done this ahead of planning, there will be Section 106 that we can tap into in terms of the completed developments, but these are just placemaking initiatives, really. So yeah, LLDC have thrown in some money for each of those hubs, but it's not kind of make or break funding, if you will. It's more contributory.
I see. Yeah, it's good to work in. It's always good to have a cocktail of funding for these things, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
There's a question here specifically about how you develop those partnerships with the charity partners. How did you select them? How did they come forward, and how has that relationship gone so far?
Sure. I mean, to be honest, that's just part of the engagement strategy that has taken us through. So we've been working for 2 years on IQL North, and we've got a community garden and wellbeing hub on that site already as well. So the partnerships kind of come forward partly as just bumping into people in the street because you're there so much and talking to people a lot, and then also again through LLDC's regen team who've kindly pointed us in the direction of a few people. But as everyone on this call would probably know, it's not a massive world that we're in, so it doesn't really take very long. You're never really more than sort of 2 conversations away from someone who's doing some really good work in the area.
This is true. Yes, no, 6 degrees of separations is more like 2 in this space, I think. Yeah, you're right. The final question I had was you were mentioning that it's really important to get these things in quickly, early, before residents or other users move in. But clearly there's a balance there between behaviour change and viability. You see these primarily as placemaking. So even if they're in and they're not being used for the first sort of few months or so, that's worth it, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I say in ahead of, I mean, I'm talking in ahead of completed developments, really. So we're working with a bit longer in terms of our sort of placemaking opportunities. It can take 2-3 years. That's fine before anyone's on site and doing anything in concrete. So yeah, we have a bit more time to work with than that, but we just like to get it up and running. Also, it's quite a good statement of intent for you as a developer as well. People can kind of see what you're about and what you're trying to do a little bit more. It makes conversations about other aspects of the development a bit easier with people. Excellent.
All right. If I can pause you down for that, but bring you into the panel discussion, if that's all right. So we've got a fair number of questions in the chat that I think that a few of the panelists might want to have a crack at. The first one was around costs and how much these are costing. I think there was a specific question actually to you, Acacia. Did you want to hazard a guess at what the total cost was of the Camden hubs? And then you also perhaps rather tantalizingly mentioned revenue income as streams, and in particular advertising. I wonder if you could say a bit more about that and whether there's been any issues with planning and the like for maximising the opportunity there.
Thanks, Mark. Great questions. In terms of the costs, as Georgie mentioned, we've consulted on the first phase of mobility hubs, and now we're in the process of going throughout the internal decision making that needs to be carried out in order to take those forward. And as part of that, we would then work up the detailed design. So we haven't done the final designs yet or implemented any of the hubs yet. And as part of that, we'll do a costing exercise that will give us a clearer idea of exactly how much they're gonna cost. But at the moment, we've been kind of budgeting, between 50 and 100,000 pounds for the hubs, and that differs, depending on the amount of greening really that they include. I think the hubs themselves, they're largely to do with changing line markings on the carriageway, so they're fairly low cost in many ways, but we want our hubs to include public realm improvements and seating as well, and rain gardens and things like that, so that will add a bit more cost to the hubs. And then in terms of the advertising, we haven't pursued that in great detail yet. We've done similar exercises on other infrastructure projects in the borough, and it is quite a complicated and drawn out piece of work, and it does, as you mentioned, involve planning approval, so it's more a kind of longer term ambition. But we're very much developing these hubs as a way of kind of trialing and testing out different measures, and we recognize that some things will be easier to bring forward sooner than other elements. So we'll continue to explore things like advertising in the longer term.
Excellent. Chris, Iain, I wonder, or Robin indeed, would you like to come in on that at all, as you've had any experience with the costings and revenue generation? Chris, I don't know if you want to pop in first.
Yeah, we're it's hard to say now. Our original costs when we had the outside operator in were quite high because we had paid them to operate the bike share as well. In terms now, it's not too bad. Each e-bike is about 4,000 to 5,000, and a charging dock is about 300. So if you put 10 docks, 10 bikes, you're only about sort of approximately about 50,000. But on top of that, you've got your sort of groundworks, electrical supply, staff costs. So, I mean, if you put 10 docks in one location, you could possibly be looking about 80,000. But we, as I said before, we've got a very special relationship with the council. So we tend to use places that don't cost anything for permissions or using existing supplies, always keep the cost down. So we do try and save money as much as we can. But yeah, it's not that cheap to put in a bike share. But on top of that, now we have realized that the operations certainly outweigh the actual existing capital you have to put in. Ongoing maintenance, software, monthly bills for that it's quite expensive because it's very specialized. The revenue, we haven't seen a whole year's revenue yet, but it certainly won't be anywhere near covering the cost of operations.
Yeah, that's a big challenge. It has to be seen as an investment, I think.
Yeah.
Robin, any reflections on this and from your other projects, particularly this sort of revenue stream piece? Have you seen that realised anywhere particularly effectively?
I mean, I was trying to think of specific examples. I think what can be quite good is, and I know quite a few speakers have already touched on this, is where you include mobility aspects at a mobility hub. So it obviously depends on the location, but is there scope for community facilities or cafes or parcel lockers? you know, all these different things that you can bring into a mobility hub, the different trip generators, things that can help to sort of add, you know, whether it's passive surveillance or community, you know, buy-in. You know, I think there's a lot of different ways you can combine, you know, something that is transport with something that's a lot more than just transport. So I think that's you know, that's quite a crucial way of doing that. But it does, as I say, it does vary. You have to really approach each location and on a case-by-case basis.
That makes sense. Iain, any further reflections on cost income?
Yeah, well, no, just on costs, we're FTZ funded. We've got about 3 million allocated to this stream. It includes a couple of other projects as well involved in that. So with this, we've gone for 2 different modes really. With residential hubs, there's really nothing there at the moment, and we've got, including contingency, I think 1.3 to 1.5 allocated to that million. But then with the district car park hubs, we've got 3 sites and we've got about a budget of 400k. So I think a lot of the issues has been with the charging infrastructure and the utilities and get connections and things like that. And then also with just the different types of street furniture that we're looking at for the 2 different hubs. We are treating it as quite a, you know, this is the first of many, but also it's an experiment and a chance to learn. So that's where the differentiation of those 2 types of sites come in. As for revenue, yeah, we've looked at that in terms of, you know, what we can put in the totem in terms of, you know, potential of hiring the parking locations from the operators of the micro-mobility modes we've got. In terms of in some of the hubs, we've already have a contract with our bus operator and the advertising there. So obviously it needs to, it can't conflict with that. Yeah. So that's where each individual site would have its own arrangement put in place in terms of the proximity of where we can't put it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, just another hat on, actually, Acacia, I was in a meeting with Sam Margolis the other day from Camden, talking about the analysis you've done about shared mobility PTAL, I guess, or shared mobility access zones, and the extent to which that could be used to get funding in from the planning process. So developers would be paying essentially to help support the rollout of these hubs through Section 106, or indeed via community infrastructure levy, or even infrastructure levy if we ever get that. That seemed quite an exciting new revenue stream that you might be able to bring on as well. There was quite a lot of comments in the chat about working with the rail providers. I seem to have lost Iain, actually. Oh no, Iain's still. Sorry,
I'm back, but I'm not in the.
Sorry, hopefully we could spotlight you in a second.
Disconnected, yeah.
Welcome back, Iain. Yes, maybe Self and Chris maybe can say a little bit about working with the rail networks in particular. Have you found that challenging? Particularly, there's a comment here around trying to get mobility hubs near stations, which is difficult when they're required to keep parking at all costs.
Sorry,
Chris, you go. Chris.
Yeah, we have one of our high bike stations outside the Inverness railway station, and it's the most popular in Inverness. Network Rail were fine to deal with. The only thing is that they took quite a long time to get back to us. There was no urgency when we have a project deadline. We did have to chase them a few times, but they were happy to have the system put in. They do like to keep their parking. You're correct there, and they like to have everything neat and tidy. They don't like bikes. Sometimes we have a surplus of bikes that end up at docks without charging, and they get chained to the railings and things like that. So they will message us and say, "Can someone come and clean the place up?" But other than that, they've been very, very happy to have sort of sustainable transport and bike shares, etc., close to the railway station. Yeah,
is that your experience, in?
Yeah, I mean, I think with the layout of the main station in Nottingham, the station street's actually on adopted highway, so we can put in e-scooters and e-bikes there, and as Chris said, it's probably the most popular spot. So it's all about management of that site, and we are looking at future measures in terms of capping the site and incentivizing other locations around the station.
Yeah, Can be done. You just have to persevere and work to their timetable, not yours, I think is the answer there. There was quite a few questions here about the way that we've got the solution, if you like, on the ground, some of which are very sort of pleasing to the eye and quite striking, actually. But of course, the user experience is more than that, and it's about how people access those services and their sort of plethora of apps, I think was one comment made. How have people kind of tackled this? Matt, you had the sort of Mobilio app, which was the intention was that would provide services to everything that was in the space, basically.
Yeah, that's right. In fact, I've just seen Ross's name down the side, Ross Basnet, who's been developing that app for us. But yeah, that incorporates the API stacks from Enterprise and from Brompton. And Brompton have incorporated the e-cargo bikes within their own as well. So basically, yeah, so we wanted to, it needed to be one stop. Otherwise, yeah, you're quite right. You don't want to be. That's not really using a hub, is it? If you go in there and you've got to download 3 apps in order to get the different solutions. So, yeah, it just means that there's a bit more work to do on the software development side.
But it's for us to do that legwork, so the user doesn't have to, though. I guess is the key.
I guess so. Yeah.
Who else would like to comment on plethora of apps and how you've done your best to try and reduce that?
We have our Go High app, which we've also was developed through Mobilio and Fleet on Demand, and they're really good to work with. And also our software provider for the other apps are very happy to give us access to the API, so we can then forward them on and try and integrate them into the Go High app as well. So we have almost all modes of transport integrated into one app in Inverness, including ferries, air travel. So it's quite important to have the one app, although it's a challenge getting people to move on to that app if they've already started using the original one.
Yeah, that's always always difficult to get people to break habit. Hannah, I wonder if we could bring you in. So, I mean, what I thought was interesting about your perspective was about how we can use mobility hubs to maybe tackle some of the inequities that have been built into the transport system over the last, well, however many hundreds of years, particularly maybe in the last 100 years. Listening as you have to the debate, I mean, do you see that there are, mobility hubs can genuinely deal with some of these inequities, or are you worried that we might be baking in new inequities in the way that we, digital access and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that we've been studying to kind of land on mobility hubs as I saw like someone asked, are they really worth the investment? Is, that we're spatial and visual creatures. We kind of go where we know how to go. And when we think about kind of the spatial design that we support, like you said, Mark, there's a lot of evidence of supporting the movement of men and their travel patterns. So, I mean, we do think that kind of the spatial and digital infrastructure together really could provide and support some of the disparities that we're seeing. Of course, the digital divide, I think, is something that we need to continue to solve for, and making things more available without you relying on an app, and still having the opportunity to use cash and have call centers and things like that. But yeah, I also just put in the chat one of the most recent literature reviews I found on gender and mobility. There was a question on barriers, and the kind of biggest barriers being security, availability, simplicity, and cost for women specifically. And so thinking about the mobility hubs solving those things directly, I think, is something that we'll want to hone in on, so that we can address those.
And Georgie, I was quite taken by your description of the fact that within the Somers Town, obviously that's an area which does have some economic disadvantages, and I presume therefore partly asking you to speak on behalf of your client there, but partly the idea behind mobility hubs was to help tackle that in some respect.
Yeah, I mean, I think specifically an area of high deprivation, but also very low household car ownership. It's a really well-connected area, obviously Somers Town, so it's a good test ground from that perspective. People are well connected up to the public transport network already. But yeah, it's an opportunity to provide additional transport kind of options and opportunities for people who don't have a household car.
Excellent. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. I think we've come to the end of our discussions, and apologies to the CoMo team. We didn't have time, I'm afraid, for your polls, but hopefully we can return to them in some other form. I mean, I found that I learned a lot there. It's great to get down and dirty with the reality of delivering these things. And what was interesting was there were so many different models there as well. So it feels like wherever you are in the country or indeed internationally, that there's some practical operating model that you can follow to get this going. Much easier, of course, if government just gives you money to do it. But actually that's not a full stop if they don't. So yeah, thank you to everybody. Please do share any thoughts that you have, and lots of you do have thoughts on your social media using the hashtag CoMo2023. And please do also join us for the last session, I believe, of the conference, which is global news in shared transport. So from Chicago and Sweden to the rest of the world, please do come along to that. And I believe that is starting in about 30 minutes time. Yes, there it is on the screen in front of us. So yeah, please do come and join us for that. And yeah, on behalf of the panel and on CoMo, thank you very much again for everybody. And yeah, see you in half an hour or so.